Okay, so today we're talking about microphones and how we get the signal from your voice into your computer. Now, there are a few different ways you can do this, and I'm going to run through the different options and a few different scenarios of why you would choose one option over another. Firstly, we're going to talk about the most current technology, and a technology that it's almost there in terms of quality, but is something that we should definitely explore. And that's USB technology. Now, this mic here in the center, this mic is a USB mic. Let me hold this up. Let me see. There you go. The great thing about this microphone is that you have a single cable. Let me just get that for you. Coming out of the microphone, plugs in like that, and then the other end plugs into your computer or your iPhone or your iPad or your Android or whatever it is. This is a lightning connector, and that's it. That's everything. That's the whole technology sorted. You plug this microphone into your computer, bam, you're ready to go. So why doesn't everyone do that? Well, generally speaking, the quality isn't there yet. Technically, you can record at the specifications that are advised by recording engineers, but the quality of the microphone and the conversion of your sound from your voice into the microphone, it gets processed within this whole box here, and then it gets converted into a digital signal and plugged into your computer. That whole process is done in here. And there is some degree of sacrifice that goes with that convenience. These microphones, there are a plethora of them these days, and they tend to be pretty reasonably priced. Now, the reason I have this one is because I use it when I travel. It's tiny, you can see it's a tiny little microphone, plug a cable in, plug that into my iPad, and I've got a recording device. But like I say, there are compromises, and that's why that's my travel setup and not my home studio setup. So that's the USB route. Now, that's not to say USB microphones are not going to experience technological advancement to get to a point where they are good enough to use for broadcast quality. But we're not there yet. But having said that, they are usable to a certain degree. So let me move this out the way. And what I'm going to do is talk about the remaining two options that we have here. So let me bring them. This might roll away, this one, because it's round. I had this balanced. There we go. So these two microphones represent two very different technologies in the microphone world, and while they might not specifically be used all the time, particularly this one, they are good representations of the two different main schools of thought regarding microphones. So let me talk about this one first. This is never used in voiceover, really. It's a relatively cheap microphone. It's an SM57. However, it has a big brother, which I don't have, called an SM7B. And the SM7B you see everywhere in radio stations and some recording studios and some post studios. Now, this microphone is built incredibly strongly. You see these kind of microphones at gigs, bands thrashing there on the guitar cabinets and on drums. And so they're very, very strong, and they take an awful lot of volume. And they're relatively reasonably priced. One of the problems with them is that the signal that you get out of them is quite low, quite weak. So what you have to do before you get it into your computer is you have to turn up that signal. And the turning up of the signal introduces noise. And noise, as you can probably imagine, is not great in your recordings because it's distracting and it just doesn't sound professional. Which leads me to this microphone. This is a condenser microphone, specifically a large diaphragm condenser microphone. I'm not going to do it because, let's see, no, it's not particularly easy to open. You probably can't see, but in there is a large diaphragm. It's what's called a side address microphone because it is up this way and the mouth, let me do it sideways, your mouth speaks into it from the side. This microphone is like this and you speak into the front. So you can actually see there that the diaphragm here is really quite small there. And the diaphragm on this microphone, which is where the sound is actually picked up and converted, is much larger. This microphone also requires power to operate. You might see on mixing desks or other pieces of technology a button with +48 on it, or the word phantom. That refers to the electricity that is passed down a wire to a microphone to make it work. And these microphones require power, phantom power, to make them work. Now, the benefit of that is that they're much more sensitive, which means that they pick up more intricately, and that can be a blessing and a curse. So the large diaphragm condenser microphone has got a very wide what's called frequency response. Now, frequency is measured in hertz, and what frequency is the range of pitch. So we start out at a low frequency, say 50, 60 hertz, and we can go all the way up to, tens of thousands of hertz, really, but that's beyond human hearing. In reality, our human range, when we're at our best, is 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, 20K. And these microphones pretty much cover that whole spectrum. Now, why would you say that was a problem? Well, these microphones are so sensitive, they're not just picking up your voice, but they're picking up the environment that you're recording in. And when you're recording voiceover, you do not want to hear the environment. The environment, and unless it's part of the story that's being told, in which case it's usually added synthetically, but almost 100% of the time, the environment needs to be negated in the recording. Recording studios negate that via acoustic treatment of the room. And we will get to that because it is possibly the most important technical consideration for you when setting up your studio, because that really affects the effectiveness of every link in the chain, from your voice through to processing it on the computer once you've recorded everything. So these microphones are more sensitive to the room, and these are less so, but they have a more reduced frequency response, and they aren't as detailed and rich as condenser microphones. So we have dynamic microphones and condenser microphones. The dynamics are cheaper, they're tougher, they're really great for, generally speaking, focusing on receiving the source as opposed to the room. And the condensers are more sensitive, rich, but with that come some potential downsides. Now, within these worlds, there are more subdivisions, and I'm skipping out on some information that I could tell you, but I just don't want to confuse you at this stage, and you can launch into examining these things further yourself. But generally speaking, those are the two main camps, and USB. Now, in VoiceOver, we deal with dynamic mics a fair amount. There's the SM7B, which I was talking about earlier. There's the RE20, which you see in radio stations all the time. That's the sort of long tube mic you may have seen. But there's another group of microphones that fall within the condenser range, and they're called shotgun microphones, and I've got one here to show you. See if I can stop it from rolling away. Whoop. There we go. Now, let me move it up a bit. As you can see, it's a long tube of a microphone, And this is a front address microphone. So much like the dynamic we were looking at, you speak into the end of it. They've got these cutout sections along either side, and we won't get into that, why they have those right now. I'll go into that later. That's kind of pretty interesting. So what is the difference really between these two microphones? Well, this microphone picks up sound in a shape sort of like this. It comes out and then round and a little bit from behind. Now, the benefit of that is that you can be within, so long as you're within that sphere, that sort of space, the microphone will pick you up relatively evenly. This microphone, however, has a more reduced field of pickup, and you tend to be a little bit further away from these microphones. Now, one of the benefits is that, again, you get less of the room because it's rejecting a lot of the space around it and just focusing on your voice. However, when you're doing voiceovers, let's assume this is my mouth here and this is the microphone, as you can see. You tend to get into it and you can be moving all around like that, and you're voicing the words and you're articulating and you're shaking your head around, and you can move in and out of that zone. In reality, this microphone would be further away, but just showing you for illustration purposes here. And that's not ideal really, because it affects the sound. So that's the downside of using a shotgun. But they do have a great sound. A lot of them do really complement the human voice, both male and female. This one is a Rode NTG3, but the very popular one is the Sennheiser 416. And you see that in promo studios, in animation. It's great in animation because if you've got multiple people in a room, you're really focusing on each performer, and that field of pickup is reduced so you don't get too much spill from either side. Okay, I'm plowing on through mic stuff and I don't want to overload you with information, but you can always rewatch this video. So now let's talk about how we get the sound into the microphone, out of the microphone, and into your computer. Now, putting USB aside, from your microphone, let's use this shotgun microphone. I'm going to move this out of the way because it rolls everywhere. From your microphone, you need to plug in what's called an XLR cable. XLR is a balanced cable. It's got 3 pins. Whoops, there you go. You can see it's got 3 pins. And it means, the fact that it's balanced means it is less prone to interference, and you can run a cable a long way. And you will have less chance of interference and signal degradation. It uses a very clever technology that's surprisingly simple when you look into it, but I'm not going to get into that now. So you have your other end of your cable. What do you do with that? Well, this is still an analog signal. Although the sound waves from your voice have been turned into electrical energy, that is still an analog signal. Now, your computer, as you know, is a digital device. So we need to convert the signal from this into digital information for your computer to be able to understand it. Okay, let me move some stuff and show you an interface. This is an interface. Sorry, it's a bit dark. Let me move it into the light. There we go. What this is a box. Just going to put it down. That does exactly what I said. It turns analog information from your microphone into digital, and then it comes out of this box as digital information and plugs into your computer. So I just plug it into the back. Like so. And then, I don't have it with me right now, but there's a USB cable here. You all know what a USB cable is. You plug that into your computer and then bam. So there's basically 2 things that are happening within this box. And most interfaces of the sub $1,000 range will do double duty really. What they're doing is they're both supplying the microphone with phantom power, if it's a condenser microphone, and then boosting that level, and then also turning that boosted analog signal into digital information, and then piping that into your computer. But when you get into the more upper echelon studios, these two processes are generally separated into multiple devices. So you will have one device that amplifies the microphone signal and introduces certain pleasing characteristics. When it does that, that's what you pay for when you buy an expensive preamp. And then you have another device that takes that signal and converts it into digital information. And you can pay a lot of money to buy a box that all it does is it converts an analog signal into digital information. And maybe when you advance to a more pro level, you'll worry about spending money on a specific preamp that you particularly love, and then a particular analog to digital converter that you particularly love. But sub $1,000 price range for getting your sound into the computer, you know, you're going to do it in a single box. Now, the great thing is these days, these boxes do a great job of preamplifying the microphone signal and converting that into digital information, right down to like $100 interfaces. They're all pretty good. And when you start paying much more for these boxes, you're getting incrementally small increases in quality. It's a rule of diminishing returns at that point. So you might spend $600 on a box like this and get a pretty good sound. This isn't the one I use, this is my old one, but it's still pretty effective. And then your next jump may be up to $1,500 or $2,000, and it will be a little bit better. It's not going to be a night and day difference. And I have to say, the same can be said for microphones. And not a lot of people realize this. They think if you buy, you know, this microphone, I want to say is around $600, this shotgun, this NTG3. You could double your money and buy a Sennheiser 416. Now, it's not going to be double the improvement in sound quality and build quality. It's an incremental improvement. And the same goes for a $3,000 microphone and a $5,000 microphone. They're not 2, 3, 5 times the quality that go along with 5 times the price. So that's the important thing to learn. When you're starting out and you can spend, let's say, $300 and up on a microphone and $500 and up on a preamp, you're going to be getting 90% of the way there. And at that point, the preamp, converter, and microphone are not the thing that is going to differentiate you from pretty much anyone. It's going to be your skill, your acting ability, the individual thing that you bring to the audition or whatever it is that gets you the job. Okay, there's just 2 more pieces of gear that I want to talk to you about. One of them is this. This is a pop shield. Now what this does, let me bring the microphone back in. What this does is it goes between your mouth and the microphone. And when you say words like P, you project a burst of air out of your mouth. Now that burst of air can, if you're close to the microphone, go straight into the end and cause what's called plosive. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's like a little explosion. And it's very unpleasant sounding. What these things do, whoops, sorry, knock the mics down again. What these things do is they break up that airflow. You'll see it's made out of lots of little holes of metal. Some of them are made out of material. And they break up that airflow. So some microphones are more sensitive to plosives than others. Dynamic microphones are less sensitive than condenser microphones, but sometimes they're still a problem, particularly if you get right on them. So you'll see these everywhere, these pop filters, and sometimes people will use a piece of foam that goes over the top. I don't have it to hand here, and it's like a sock that goes over the top of the microphone itself and it stays there. But that does also knock off some of the high frequency sounds as well. So there's a real compromise with that way of doing things. So you're going to have to put your microphone on a stand. I don't have one here. You've seen mic stands before. And you know, if you go to a gig, you'll see a mic just on a clip like this, just plugged in into the top of the stand, and that's that. However, with condenser microphones, they're very sensitive to sound, as I mentioned before. And if you knock the mic stand, if there's some vibration on the floor, that sound can travel up the mic stand and into your microphone, and you may be dancing around and getting really excited in your voiceover, and you have no idea that you're ruining the sound by all that vibration and that movement going into the recording. So what you have is this bit of technology. What you have is this, and what this is it's a cage that is wrapped around the outside of the microphone, and there is an inner cage that is suspended by these elasticated bands. And what that does is that protects the microphone from vibration, you can see there, from the stand. Let me leave that like that. It's not going anywhere now. Okay, so particularly when you have a large diaphragm condenser microphone, you want to make sure you've got a decent shock mount, and that will help prevent those vibrations. Okay, so that, I think, is pretty much it for talking about the microphones and how you connect them to your preamp / converter, broadly known as an interface, and then the different types of microphones that you may or may not choose to use for your voiceovers. Hopefully that wasn't too much information. I know there was a lot there, and frankly I could talk all day on this and you could probably tell, and there's a lot more that we'll get into at a later date, but I did want to kind of bombard you with all that information now, because you can't learn this stuff piece by piece. You kind of have to just knuckle down and get your head around condenser microphones, dynamic microphones, and the difference between a shotgun microphone and a large diaphragm condenser microphone, the benefits and drawbacks of dynamics versus condensers, and a little bit of basic information about how the signal goes from the microphone into your computer, and the stages of technology that are required to get that signal from an analog electrical signal to a digital signal. Okay, I hope that wasn't too traumatizing, and we'll speak next time. Thank you.